Hi everyone. We're back here in our teaching garden, the Giving Garden, at the fairgrounds here in our community. This is where we were here in the spring, in May, and we were here through the summer doing our modules, our basic how-to gardening modules for the Fairfield Garden Initiative program. It's the end of season, and we have a couple more tips we'd love to share with you about how to get your beds all tucked in for winter. This particular module is going to be module number 16, planting garlic, the how and the why and the where of planting garlic. So we have a bed here that was in zucchini and beans, pole beans, over the summer. We've cleared away the residual plant material that was in the bed, and now we just have some residual mulch over the surface of the soil, and there is some cover crop seed that was laid down a week or two ago. We don't see much germination here, but perhaps maybe we'll see that in the spring for the seeds that are able to make it through the winter under the snow. So garlic is one of those plants that you put in the ground in early to late fall. You can plant garlic in our temperate region here in zone 5B, September, October, November, December, you can still plant garlic. You can plant garlic really until the ground freezes. We've been having warm temperatures here. Today it's in the 50s, nice and sunny. The soil is still wonderfully workable. We had rain over the weekend, and so the soil is moist. Ideal conditions for planting garlic. You don't want the soil to be too moist where you're actually working wet soil, because you're going to need to work the soil a little bit for this garlic. Garlic is a heavy feeder. It also is a plant that puts on a pretty substantial root system, provided that it's in a soil that is well drained and well structured, not too compacted. So we want to make sure that the soil is not compacted here, and we want to make sure that we have some additional fertility in place for these garlic bulbs. You're planting a clone of a plant, and so garlic is not something you plant from seed. It's very rare that you'll ever see a garlic seed, a little black garlic seed. You might come across a garlic bulbule, and I'll explain what that is in just a moment, but a garlic seed is a rare find. If you are someone who is an avid garlic grower and you're letting your garlic perennialize in your system, you might get to the point where you start to see garlic seed. But that's a whole nother story, something you can Google and look into and see if you want to go through that process. But in many times that garlic seed is sterile and not viable as a seed source. So garlic is a clone of the mother plant. So the type of garlic you're planting is going to propagate into that same type of garlic the next season. And so the particular garlic that we're planting right now, it's an organic seed garlic, and this one's name is German white garlic. This is a hardneck garlic. There are two types of garlic, soft neck and hard neck. In our temperate climate, hardneck garlic is a preferred type of garlic to plant. It's a little hardier. You can tell it's a hardneck because its stem goes all the way through the garlic bulb down to the bottom where the roots come out. When you break that off, it's got a flat little stem on it, rigid garlic stalk. And so this is hardneck garlic. It's not the kind of garlic you would braid, that's soft neck garlic. But again, hardneck garlic is hardier. It also is a type of garlic that traditionally has larger cloves. It'll produce larger cloves. These cloves are not very large. They can be larger. This German white can produce nice large garlic cloves. Each one of these individual sections of the garlic, that's called a clove. The whole garlic is a garlic bulb or a head. So each one of these will have anywhere from 6 to 8 garlic cloves. And again, these are a little small for a seed garlic, but they were a great price, so that's why we're using the smaller cloves. They'll get bigger year after year as you grow them out and grow bigger, garlic bulbs, and you're saving the largest cloves. The larger the clove is, the larger your bulb will be the next year. Again, garlic is something that is planted in the fall in our temperate region. It needs a very long growing season. This won't be harvested until July of next year, likely. We won't go through the ins and outs of growing garlic. We're just going to talk about planting it. So we have a bed here that has come out of, like I said, zucchini and green beans. And it has a little bit of cover crop seed, which is just on the surface, lightly sown, broadcast on the surface. There's some residual mulch from the growing season, but now we need to prep this bed to plant the garlic. What I'm going to do is just check the soil compaction. A good way to do that is to use a garden fork, standard garden fork. These are great. They've got tines that are not easily bent. They're usually 4 or 5 tines. It's not like a manure or a compost fork where it has really narrow tines. This garden fork has really rigid, wide tines that aren't easily bent that you can use to really manipulate the soil if you need to. We're not looking to turn this soil over. We're just looking to check for compaction and to do a little aeration. The soil that I'm working with here is very lofty. It is really just a compost-based soil media all the way through the depth of the bed until you get to the subsoil. The root systems of garlic can, be quite substantial. They're a very fibrous root system, and they can be rather shallow, but you're at least going to need 6 to 8 inches of nice aerated soil in order to have enough growing space for that root system. So like I said, this particular bed was produced with more of a compost growing media. And I know that because I, have grown in this bed this growing season, and I also did the soil testing for this soil in the spring, this past spring. So what I'm doing is just going through and getting those tines all the way, just sinking that fork as far as it'll go, just lifting back a little bit just to get a little aeration space there. And I'm doing that every 6 inches or so. I'll show you an example of a soil on the bed adjacent here that this wouldn't necessarily be the easiest task with a garden fork, and you might want to consider using a more substantial tool for that. Garlic is a plant that's going to need about 4 inches between cloves. Each one of those plants is going to produce that bulb, and that bulb can, get to be about 3 inches in diameter when fully grown. And so you want to make sure you've got enough space between each clove that garlic bulb does not feel overcrowded. 4 to 6 inches is fine. Planting them in a linear row is great. It's easy. They'll start to come up in the spring. You'll see their little green tops coming up in the spring. And they are great as a border plant, a border companion plant. Being an allium, they are very fragrant, like an onion or a leek. And they are very great companions. They're very mycorrhizal. They can deter some of the garden pests away from your more delectable garden crops. So they're a good companion to put along the border or the edge of a growing bed. And so next season, since I'm going to put garlic along the front edge, and I will do the same on the back edge, I'll have garlic placed close proximity to the edge of the bed, 3 inches away from the edge of the bed, 3 inches away from each other. And then the whole center portion of that bed is wonderful for whatever we decide to plant. We can still put a nice trellis. We had a trellis in this bed, so we can still do cucumbers or tomatoes or pole beans, anything like that. And there'll still be plenty of light for the garlic. This is south, north, west, east. And so the garlic will get plenty of sun throughout the day on both sides of that trellised area. So you get the idea. We're just going through, loosening the soil, making sure that it's not compacted, that root system is going to be able to grow and expand in this soil. And it will be able to do that very well. Again, garlic being a heavy feeder, it does like to expand that root system out into really organic matter rich soil, so that it can acquire nutrients far outside of its little growing area. I wanted to show you the difference. This particular soil is a mineral soil. It's not a compost. These beds were put in place first. They were put in, I don't know when they were put in, but I know that they were put in first. They're at least 7 to 10 years old, these beds, and they were made with the standard topsoil. That was made with compost. These have had a sprinkling of compost on the top, but they are not as loose as this soil, as lofty, as full of organic matter. This soil is more of a mineral soil. It's got a lot more clay and silt, and you see that it's a lot more, it's not a lot of work, but it's more work to get that garden fork to aerate the soil. And I'm putting a lot of tension on this wooden handle, and I could potentially break this wooden handle if I was trying to aerate this entire bed with this small tool, knowing how dense that soil is. This is called a broad fork, and it is designed to handle just that scenario. And so you've got tines that are 14 to 16 inches long, and again, nice wide blades. They're not super sharp, that they are pointy. So, and this is heavy. You know, this weighs 35 pounds probably. Don't drop it on your toe, it'll go right through the top of your foot. But that weight comes in handy when you're dealing with a really dense soil. Because I don't want to compact this soil anymore, I'm going to use my handy dandy board here. And we're not going to broad fork this whole area. I'm just going to show you how you might use a broad fork in this scenario. Again, if we were planting garlic, we really want a planting zone that's at least 6 to 8 inches depth loosened. But if you're going to do this work, if you're going to bring the broad fork out, go ahead and do the work. So we're going to get that in the ground, and these were designed to be stepped on. This tool will last longer than I live. It's a very well made broad fork. So there's no worry about it, damaging it by doing this process. We're not wanting to flip the soil profile. We don't want to disturb the ecosystem. We're just getting a little air, a little pathway for the atmosphere to submerge down into the soil, water to percolate down, break up that compaction layer. And so just going to pull back like you would with a garden fork. And then you just wiggle it out of the ground. It takes, some doing, but it's doable. And you would just go back 6 inches, do the next round. So that's how a broad fork works. Anytime you're laying your tools down, always put them with the blade or the face end down towards the ground so that someone doesn't come and step on it and bring a handle up at themselves. All right, and so we've got an area aerated to put our garlic on this side of the bed. We'll need to do the other side, but this is just what we need to do for demonstration here. Now we're going to pull a furrow. That's one way we can do it, especially because this soil is so lofty and airy. We can pull a drill or a furrow with a hoe about 2 inches deep. Nice line. We're just collecting the mulch as we go here, and that's fine. You can rake that mulch back before you do this process, but it's not hard just to take it, shake it, get the excess soil, lift it out of there, and then just continue on. we're going to reuse that mulch. It's going to go right back over this soil once we are ready to plant, or once we've planted our garlic and are ready to mulch it again. So we've got a nice little furrow or a drill here. Another tool that I recently found this year, it's a bulb planting tool. Really cool. This is made by Fiskars. If you have soil that will handle, you know, a broad diameter tool like this, if it's lofty, you can just drop a garlic clove right in the shoot of this tool here, and it'll drop that garlic down into the soil at about 2.5 inches deep, 3 inches deep, and then you just pull it out, close the hole over. Really fun for planting garlic quickly in and around fruit trees or in and around other perennial crops where you're just wanting to sprinkle garlic everywhere and you don't need a linear row. This is nice. Or bulbs. Really, it's got a shoot that is, I don't know, 2.5 inches in diameter, that you can use that for planting transplants, plugs that are rather small. It's great for that. Okay, so I've gone through and broken up the garlic. So I've taken the bulbs and I've broken them into their individual cloves. You leave the paper on, that's just fine. You don't need to peel these. You break it up just like you were cooking, but leave the paper on. It's fine. You don't want to disturb the growth point of this garlic, so leave the paper on. If the paper comes off, no big deal. It's fine. You want to make sure that your garlic is still firm, that it's not dried out. If it's starting to grow a green shoot, you know, it's starting to grow its leaves, that's beautiful. If it's starting to grow little roots like this one, beautiful, no problem. But if it's dried out and is really discolored, starting to turn light, you know, dark yellow or light brown, more than likely not going to be a viable garlic. I would also recommend not purchasing garlic from the grocery store for planting. You can certainly give it a try, especially if you have an organic co-op or, you know, if you're buying organic garlic. But if it's been imported, it's more than likely been irradiated, and that can kill the growth points of, you know, the seeds and the growth points of vegetables or plants. But it also, if it is a seed garlic, it will have been grown out for many generations, and so you're more than likely working with a variety that's going to be more resistant to any of the pathogens that are more prevalently attacking the garlic. Your established garlic purveyors, the growers of seed garlic, especially organic seed garlic or seed garlic in general, are going to be mindful, watchful for any of those diseases or pests. Also, some garlic that's imported is bleached in order to deal with any of the discoloration or rust or anything like that with the leaves, or I mean with the papers, to make them look more appealing. And so I would go with a seed garlic. Because garlic is mycorrhizal, I am going to use, and because garlic is a plant, I use inoculants always, regardless, always. So I'm using an inoculant here. It's called Spectrum with Micro. Spectrum with Myco. It is a Tanio Technologies seed inoculant. Again, this is not a seed, but we're planting it as if it is a seed. And what we want to have are the microorganisms that build association with plants in close proximity to the root system of this plant. So I'm just going to take a little bit, a pinch of this inoculant, you know, just a little, and I'm going to sprinkle it over. Looks like I've got about 50 cloves here. I'm going to toss that around just to make sure that the mycorrhizal fungi, there are 4 species of mycorrhizal fungi and about 16 to 20 different species of plant growth promoting and mycorrhizal supporting associated organisms in that inoculum there. All right, so I have a garlic clove that's ready to plant. But before I do that, I'm going to prep this furrow just a little bit. We're going to talk in a moment about soil amending, but I'm just going to sprinkle some of an amendment blend that I've made for this bed here in the furrow to make sure that it is close to the root system for the garlic. Again, being a heavy feeder, it's got a really long growing season. I'm going to get some of that soil amendment in close proximity to the root system of this garlic, these garlic plants, and I'm also going to put some compost down. We're not looking to add any potassium or phosphorus right now. It's fall, so we're not looking to initiate a active vegetative growth phase for any plants right now. We're about to go into the heart of winter, and we don't want fleshy green growth on any plants right now outside. We would rather them kind of put all of their reserves into their root systems, put energy into the root systems, harden off the above ground parts of the plant if they are a plant that can survive the winter, and then have reserves for restarting their growth cycles in the spring. So we're not going to put nitrogen or potassium on the soil right now. There is going to be a little, of course, in the compost, but we're not going to add any additional. And we're not going to add too much compost. We're just going to add a little bit. We can add more compost in the spring for that additional nitrogen and potassium. What we do want in this particular bed, I know we need calcium, sulfur, phosphorus. We need some of the micro trace elements. And so I've got here a blend of gypsum, which is calcium sulfate. We're just going to add a little of this, but we can add, we'll add more to the surface of the soil as well. We could add more gypsum in the spring. This also has Tennessee brown rock phosphate, which is a rock dust that is a phosphorus source, but it also has all of the trace, well, not all, has some of the trace elements, but it also has some calcium in it as well, more known for its phosphorus source. This blend has a little bit of elemental sulfur in it. Alliums do really well with adequate sulfur, and this bed is deficient, and so I wanted to make sure there was a little extra. Also, I've got some humates in here as an additional carbon source. Some boron, just a little. We'll add some more boron with the gypsum in the spring. So, you know, I may be putting ½ pound in this whole furrow here of the blend that I've made up. And then I'm going to add a little compost. We don't want to overfeed our plants, especially, you know, a baby plant. When you think about feeding a small human, you don't give them a meal that's portioned for an adult. And when you're thinking about feeding your puppy, you're not giving it 7 bags of 50-pound dog food, you know, 50 pounds of dog food, 7 bags of that all at once, right? You're not trying to feed yourself or your animals all at once. Don't do that to your plants either. Think about spoon feeding. Spoon feeding your plants. Because this is primarily a rock-based input, that takes microorganisms and plants in unison, breaking that down over time. So it's more of a metered nutrient source versus a soluble nutrient. And so if you were buying a bagged fertilizer, I wouldn't apply that, you know, if it was a soluble bagged fertilizer or packaged fertilizer, I wouldn't necessarily apply anything like that right now. You could do a little bone meal in this furrow because you want that phosphorus source for the root system. So I'm tucking these cloves in the soil about 1.5 inches, and I'm planting them about 4 inches apart from each other, maybe 5, split the difference. Poking them in the ground, pointy side up, root side down, fat side down. And when you're planting your garlic, when you're planning on, you know, having garlic for the next growing season or the next Culinary season, if you're just planting for yourself and your family, consider how much garlic you buy in a year. When you're thinking about planting your cloves, know that each one of these cloves is going to be a bulb. Do you buy a bulb of garlic every week? Well, then how many bulbs of garlic do you need to get through the year? Garlic will last, it's harvested in July. It's going to last for at least 5 months. It could last for a little bit longer. Hardneck garlic saves a little longer. And so plant as much garlic as you think you'll need over a 5-month period. Save yourself that money. I know around here, organic garlic, if you're going to buy it in the grocery store, is over $9 a pound right now. So that's really expensive. This is one of those high ROI vegetable crops. You definitely get your return when you plant the garlic. All right, so we've got our garlic all planted here. Looks like we're looking at about 18 to 20 cloves, and I'm just going to close that furrow. Trying to make sure that the soil, or the planting media, is what's covering the garlic, and I'm not knocking the mulch so much down into the furrow. We're going to top this with additional mulch, and I'll show you that shortly in one of our other modules. But again, I'm not trying to get the mulch down into the furrow. That's better placed on the top of the soil as an armor for the soil. All right, and so we had rain 4 days ago. The soil is very moist. We also have rain coming in another day and a half. I'm not going to water this in. If I wasn't expecting rain in the forecast and I wasn't planting into moist soil, I would water this in thoroughly. All right, so that is module number 16, planting garlic. We'll be back in a minute with amending the soil. We'll talk about doing fall and spring amendments.